Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Miriam Sullivan, and welcome to Creating an Equitable and Future-Focused Manufacturing Workforce with Apprenticeship event. I'm a director in JFF's Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, and I'm your MC for today's event. We're looking forward to engaging with you throughout the meeting. So we're encouraging you to use the YouTube live chat function to share your questions and comments. There will be folks from JFF that will be monitoring that chat and that will send your question and comments to the event moderators. This event is being recorded, and you will receive the recording and key resources to your email within the next few business days. We'd like to thank the AFL-CIO Working for America Institute for your continued partnership, and the Department of Labor for the support that enabled this event. Today's meeting consists of 3 panel discussions, 3 parts. Our first panel will discuss manufacturing today. Our second panel will focus on creating an equitable manufacturing apprenticeship. And our third panel discussion will focus on building to the future. And then we'll close with next steps to creating your own equitable and future-focused manufacturing workforce and how to connect with us. It is my pleasure to introduce Eric Selesnow, Senior Advisor at JFF and Head of JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Eric.
Great. Thank you, Miriam. I'll assume you can hear me okay. Really a pleasure to host everybody today. We've got quite a large crowd from all across the country who's joining us today. I think over 700 folks are joining us for this very timely and important topic. But there's going to be a lot of content and a lot of good conversation today. But we really want to start off with the right tone and really get folks thinking about some of these issues about manufacturing workforce, but mostly equity in the manufacturing workforce, and for that matter, equity in all of the workforce. And we're going to hear from some folks to do that, to help set the stage for us as we move into some of these. So we'll be hearing from Representative Bobby Scott, Maria Flynn, the CEO of JFF, and Acting Assistant Secretary Susie Levine from the U.S. Department of Labor Employment Training Administration. More about all of them later. But let me, without further delay, introduce Representative Bobby Scott, Congressman from Virginia and chairman of my favorite committee, the House Education and Labor Committee, or Education and Workforce Committee. And
Education and Labor.
Oh, Education and Labor. Sorry, I'm all these changes.
We keep changing back and forth.
Congressman Scott has been a longtime leader in advocating for apprenticeship space, particularly for registered apprenticeship. He was instrumental in moving along the National Apprenticeship Act of 2021, which to me is a historic piece of legislation that's been approved by the House and waiting to be taken up by the Senate. He's just really got a really good understanding of registered apprenticeship, and it makes me so comfortable as being a practitioner in the field to have folks on Capitol Hill and on this committee very specifically who really understand registered apprenticeship, not only how it helps businesses develop a pipeline of skilled workers, youth, adults, and others, but also how it helps workers advance and obtain economic mobility. So without further delay, Representative Bobby Scott, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Eric, for your kind introduction. And I want to thank JFF and AFL-CIO for inviting me to speak today. I also want to recognize the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning and the Working for America Institute for everything that you do to expand quality apprenticeship opportunities. I also want to recognize one of your speakers, Letitia McCain from the Apprentice School at Newport News Shipbuilding in my district. And I see her box right there. She is leading a school that for more than a century has demonstrated the power of quality registered apprenticeships to help Americans of all backgrounds access rewarding career pathways. Today's gathering could not come at a more important time. Across the country, millions of unemployed workers are still struggling to get back into the workforce. But according to one estimate, more than 7 million jobs lost during the pandemic will not come back. At the same time, manufacturers are looking to fill open positions but are struggling to find skilled talent. This moment demands that we invest in our most successful workforce initiative, the Registered Apprenticeship Program. Each year, registered apprenticeships allow hundreds of thousands of workers to learn in-demand skills, earn wages that grow with those skills, and receive nationally recognized credentials that lead to rewarding careers, including manufacturing. Registered apprenticeships also strengthen businesses by building pipelines of talented, dedicated workers. And for every dollar invested in apprenticeships, employers receive roughly $1.50 in increased productivity, reduced waste, and greater innovation. But as you know, the need to invest in workforce programs has existed long before the pandemic. Congress has not reauthorized the National Apprenticeship Act since it first passed in 1937, leaving significant room for growth as the demand for apprenticeships has increased over time. I'm pleased to share that in February, Democrats and Republicans came together again to pass a bipartisan reauthorization of the National Apprenticeship Act, and that's a bill that the House also passed last Congress with bipartisan support. The National Apprenticeship Act of 2021 invests $3.5 billion in our national apprenticeship system over the next 5 years and codifies the quality standards that have made registered apprenticeships the gold standard of workforce development programs. As manufacturers look to increase diversity of their workforce, the bill targets opportunities towards underserved workers who have not traditionally been included in apprenticeships, including women, people of color, people with disabilities, and individuals impacted by the criminal justice system. And it provides funding and resources to expand opportunities in in-demand apprenticeship sectors, including manufacturing. But the legislation also creates a dedicated funding stream to help states expand their apprenticeship opportunities and establishes apprenticeship hubs to target regional needs for industries that will include not only manufacturing, but other industries like healthcare, technology, and others that are not traditionally thought of as apprenticeship opportunities. Finally, the legislation better aligns our workforce development and education systems so more students can earn while they learn. This combined investment will create an additional 1 million apprenticeship opportunities beyond the expected growth in apprenticeships. The proposal will also save a projected $10.6 billion over the next 10 years through increased tax revenues and decreased spending on public assistance programs. I'm pleased to report that President Biden has already endorsed the National Apprenticeship Act of 2021, and I'm confident that the Democratic majority in the Senate will finally approve the bill. This could be through a standalone bill or through upcoming proposals such as the potential infrastructure and jobs package or the reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which our committee will take up this summer. So please continue to make your voices heard, and thank you again for your support. As you know, high-quality registered apprenticeship programs have the power to help people develop new skills, build new career pathways, and access socioeconomic mobility. But they also have the power to help manufacturers build strong and dependable pipelines of talent to meet the needs to both today and beyond. So I look forward to continuing to work with you to expand apprenticeship opportunities in the manufacturing sector and other sectors. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Representative Scott. I tell you, your district in Virginia is lucky to have you, and us folks in the apprenticeship stakeholder world are very lucky to have you. For all of you on the line who don't think people know what they're doing in Washington, trust me, you have some friends on the Hill who really get registered apprenticeship. They're positioning it for the future. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're really trying to advance economic mobility for all. So with that, Congressman Scott, I also want to thank Brad Markell and the folks at AFL-CIO for reaching out to you for you to join us today. I mean, it's just been great to have you, and we look forward to supporting your bill as it goes forward in the Senate. So thank you very much for joining us today, Congressman Scott. Take care. Well, that was great to hear. There's some people on the Hill who really know about registered apprenticeships and how to advance them, and they're going to give us some tools to do it in the field. It is now my pleasure to turn to my CEO. When I had some decisions to make about 4 years ago, about where I like to work, I ended up making a bet on JFF because at the time Maria Flynn was the new CEO, and I'm thrilled that I did, and I couldn't be happier with that decision. For many of you out there, know Maria. She's been around, I won't say for a very long time, but she's been around. Spent many years over at the Department of Labor in I guess late 90s and early 2000s. She worked at the local level. She worked on everything from WIA to you name it. She's done it. Spent some time at the Department of Labor and now has been at JFF for I guess about 11 years. CEO for about 4. I don't know if I got that right, but it's close. Anyway, Maria has really taken our organization into a number of different places in terms of technology and innovation and education technology and apprenticeship. And it's really through her help and vision that we created JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maria Flynn, CEO of Jobs for the Future in Boston. Thanks, Maria.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric. It's great to be here today, and thank you all for joining the conversation. I really want to start by thanking Chairman Scott for his leadership in Congress and for all that he has done, including introducing the National Apprenticeship Act of 2021. He mentioned that the act hasn't been reauthorized since 1937, and a quick story. So a big part of why I entered the workforce field is because my father worked in the workforce field for many decades in New Jersey, and I remember very clearly that 1987 was the 50th anniversary of the Apprenticeship Act because he came home from a workforce conference with like a tote bag that said, 1987, 50th anniversary. And I remember taking that bag to school with me, which wasn't exactly, a big trendsetter, but it definitely etched in my mind just the history of that legislation. And I just really hope that the Senate will pass the bill this year and that we can really, drive forward faster into a new era of apprenticeship in this country. Also, just to a little bit of context about JFF. So we are a national nonprofit that has been around for almost 40 years, and looking at the issue of work-based learning and apprenticeship has been a constant thread for us across those decades. And overall, our mission is to drive economic advancement for all, and we do that through the transformation of the nation's education and workforce systems. And work-based learning and apprenticeship is a key component of that, and we're just so fortunate to have leaders like Eric and Miriam and the whole team at the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning to be driving this work forward in partnership with so many folks at the state and local level across the country. And I also want to thank Brad and the whole team at the AFL-CIO's Working for America Institute for co-hosting this event for us and for being such great partners to JFF over many decades. I remember first working with them when I was back at the U.S. Department of Labor, and I think they were still called HRDI back then. So again, long partners and good partners, and looking forward to what we can do together during the Biden administration. So a few just quick framing points. And so one, very similar to what Chairman Scott was pointing out, that we kind of have a couple of stories happening in parallel when we look at the labor market today. So we have had a decline in unemployment, thankfully, since the height about a year ago. 6.2% nationally were the numbers for February. But if you really dig beneath that, the numbers for Black and Latino workers, for women, are still quite high. In some cases, almost double of what we're seeing on average across the country. But meanwhile, the manufacturing sector continues to have a pretty low unemployment rate despite all of the disruption of the past year. So their February numbers were at 4.8%, so below that 5% full employment threshold that many of us learned about in school years ago. And so, they are looking for skilled workers and looking for new solutions to filling that gap. And so, one thing, that we're going to focus on today is just the importance of putting diversity, equity, inclusion at the center of those recruitment efforts and those pathways and kind of the alignment of supply and demand as we kind of look to building the workforce of the future. So we know that women and people of color represent a large pool of untapped talent. And I just really encourage, all the manufacturers out there to have a renewed, really enhanced focus on diversifying their workforce and creating more inclusive workplaces in order to ensure an equitable economic recovery and opportunities for all. And when we look at some of the data from the past decade on apprentices in the manufacturing sector, we see that only 10% of those apprentices were women, 16% were Black, 12% were Hispanic. So we have room for improvement for sure. And also, as Chairman Scott mentioned, we know that apprenticeship is a critical tool for building an equitable recovery, right? It creates job opportunities that are on a career pathway to family sustaining wages. It can also be a really important reconnection strategy for unemployed or disconnected workers. It can be utilized to connect those workers to new opportunities in the manufacturing sector. And finally, we know that apprenticeship is an effective solution for both union and non-union employers. And that's why we're thrilled to be partnering with the Working for America Institute to really join forces to advance manufacturing apprenticeship in both union and non-union shops. So really looking forward to the work ahead. But now it's my privilege to introduce Susie Levine, who is the Principal Assistant Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. I had the great privilege of working at ETA for about 16 years across many administrations, and so I know just what a key role that she is in, and at such a critical time for our nation and our nation's workforce. Susie comes to this role from a great background. She was a senior leader at both Microsoft and Expedia. She's the former ambassador of the U.S. to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And most recently, she led the State Workforce Agency in Washington State. And she has been a tremendous supporter of apprenticeship for many years. And just thank you for taking the time to be here today. So over to you, Susie.
Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susie Levine, as Maria just shared, and I'm the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Employment and Training Administration at the U.S. Department of Labor. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm so excited to kick off this webinar on creating an equitable and future-focused manufacturing workforce on behalf of the U.S. Department of Labor. I just thanked Maria, and I also want to thank Eric Sellers now at Jobs for the Future and Brad Markell at AFL-CIO for putting this together, this really important webinar for their leadership on apprenticeship and workforce development for American workers. Maria mentioned that in my past, I served as our U.S. ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein, which I finished that term in 2017, but really my ambassadorship didn't end then, because what I saw there and what I learned has made me an ambassador for life for apprenticeship. And I am so thrilled at the American apprenticeship renaissance that is currently underway. Advanced manufacturing companies face really complex workforce challenges in an increasingly competitive and global marketplace. Apprenticeship is your proven solution for recruiting, training, and retaining world-class manufacturing talent. Thousands of manufacturers across the United States use the apprenticeship training model to upskill current workers and vet new talent while instilling the company's culture, recruit and develop a diverse and highly skilled workforce, improve productivity, profitability, and their bottom line. They also use it to reduce turnover, improve loyalty, and retain top talent, and to demonstrate investment in their community. Currently, there are over 16,500 apprentices working in the advanced manufacturing sector across the country, about 9.9% of which are female, approximately 66.7% of which are white, 9.2% are Hispanic, 10% are African American, 3.5% are Asian, 1.4% are Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, and 0.07% are American Indian or Alaskan Native. The data indicates that while we've seen growth in the number of apprenticeship programs in the advanced manufacturing sector and growth in the number of opportunities for underrepresented populations, there is still a ton of work to be done to engage women and people of color. The Biden administration is committed to achieving equity in the workplace, specifically by supporting the expansion of registered apprenticeships and investing in rebuilding the middle class, expanding partnerships, and connecting a diverse workforce to family-supporting living wage jobs. To that end, the U.S. Department of Labor has invested $22 million in industry intermediaries that are scaling strategies to increase access to apprenticeships for underrepresented populations, including women and people of color in sectors including information technology, cybersecurity, telecommunications, and 5G advanced manufacturing. Other areas like hospitality, healthcare and health IT, transportation and logistics, and energy. One such industry intermediary is Jobs for the Future, JFF, and its key partners who are helping to scale up JFF's proven strategies for expanding registered apprenticeship programs in advanced manufacturing. And since 2016, JFF has enrolled close to 3,000 new apprentices in advanced manufacturing and other sectors and worked closely with nearly 1,000 employers, including Lockheed Martin, Panasonic, Tesla, EmployBridge, John Deere, and Hypertherm. AFL-CIO also previously served as an intermediary and, of course, is the nation's premier union and advocate for working Americans. As an intermediary, AFL-CIO championed the development of the industrial maintenance technician, which provided an entry-level opportunity into the manufacturing industry. In addition to JFF's and AFL-CIO's efforts, Department of Labor has begun to see the following promising practices from our investments and partnerships around engaging diverse populations in apprenticeship. And I sure hope that they're on this session today and are hearing their little shout out to them. First off, I'll talk about Apprenticeship Idaho, who is a state grantee. Their partnership with vocational rehabilitation has helped connect individuals with disabilities to registered apprenticeship opportunities. A new partnership with the International Rescue Committee is successfully providing apprenticeship opportunities for refugees. Apprenticeship Idaho is also doing proactive outreach to tribal nations and has helped one tribe even become a program sponsor. Now we're going to go to the other side of the country, Apprenticeship Carolina, also a state grantee. They've worked to be more intentional about outreach to underserved or underrepresented populations. The team will be hiring 4 registered program specialists responsible for program implementation and recruitment for helping to build connections among employers and community-based organizations. Apprenticeship Carolina has recently signed memoranda of understanding with 3 chapters of the Urban League in South Carolina to promote apprenticeships and increase access to apprenticeship opportunities within their networks. Examples like these show all of us that when companies and organizations are innovative and intentional when it comes to diversifying their workforce, the opportunities are endless. In fact, when talking to our partners about the future of apprenticeship within advanced manufacturing, we've heard the following themes: an increased focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, continuous innovation in how apprenticeship can serve the needs of employers, particularly in embracing youth apprenticeship, greater demand for occupations involving automation, robotics, and mechatronics, and limitless opportunity to support high-skill, high-wage jobs in the community. As I mentioned earlier, increasing access to underrepresented populations and advanced manufacturing are 2 top priorities for myself and the administration as a whole. It's also really helpful to understand why this matters. Infusing equity, inclusion, and diversity in this work ensures that diverse communities are better represented in this critical workforce. This is societally critical, but it also makes important business sense. Businesses make better and more applicable products and do better when they embrace and bring in diverse communities into their organizations. Now, I'm going to share a story that is not comparable from an equity standpoint, but it is from a diversity and inclusion standpoint. And that's my personal experience in terms of the value of diversity. And it goes back to the first week of my career. I joined Microsoft. I worked on MS-DOS in the Jurassic period of technology. And I was the only woman on this particular team. They were having a discussion on what to name a feature in the product. And they were going to name it Maxi Protection Technology. Now, if we were live and in person, about half of the audience, the female half, would have just laughed, and the male half would be, that sounds awesome. Well, so I raised my little hand in this group of men, and I said, excuse me, fellas, but that sounds like something that you'd use once a month. Well, the good news is they listened to me, and I really appreciated that. Ultimately, it was named Data Protection Technology. But it speaks to how we need to be mindful of bringing other voices into the room and embracing those different perspectives, because again, you get better, more innovative, and more creative results. We here at USDOL are in the process of planning a listening tour, and we want to hear from industry and a broad representation of partners like you to better understand what your needs are, what the best practices are that you're seeing on the ground, and how we can scale them. We want to hear recommendations for strengthening, diversifying, and modernizing registered apprenticeship. I am so looking forward to participating in this important dialogue and hearing your ideas and suggestions for how we can increase equity and inclusion and diversity in advanced manufacturing and what we can do to bring those ideas to fruition. Thank you so much for having me today, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Thank you so much, Assistant Deputy Secretary Levine, and thank you for sharing your personal story at Microsoft in particular. I did chuckle before you mentioned the rest of the story. Also, thank you to Chairman Scott for the opening remarks and Maria Flynn, JFF CEO. It is my pleasure to kick us off and start the first panel of the day and introduce your panel for manufacturing apprenticeships today. We're bringing back Eric Sells now as the moderator, so Senior Advisor at JFF, Head of the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary for the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. I'd also like to introduce Sasha Cooper-Morrison, Business Engagement Team Lead at the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship. And then last but not least, a friend and a colleague, Brad Markell, Executive Director at the AFL-CIO's Industrial Union Council and Working for America Institute. So I'll turn it over to Eric to kick us off in the first panel discussion.
Thank you, Miriam. And, yep, I got it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary Levine, for your comments and stories. I can't tell that one, but glad that you did. And, you know, certainly, you know, having Chairman Scott here was just, I mean, we've got some serious leadership on this call and we really appreciate it. So thank you. Well, welcome Sasha and welcome Brad Markell. It's so I'm so happy that you guys could join us today. We're not going to be talking at you all that much in the audience. We just needed to get some of that intro stuff out of the way. And I'm glad that we did because it really helps set a super tone for today. We don't have a whole lot of time here, but we do have substantial amount of time to make some points about this issue. And so I want to engage in a conversation with Sasha Cooper-Morrison and Brad about what's going on in the field. And want to learn a little bit about what each of them do, and then we're going to drill down a little bit, everything on equity to how do we deal with manufacturing apprenticeships in a post-COVID recovery, which we're all feeling pretty hopeful about, and moving that along. So thanks for joining us today. And Sasha, I want to welcome you first. I know, you've been at DOL for a while. You've worked on apprenticeship for a while, and you've moved into a couple of different positions over there. But tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and give us an overview of some of the work you're focused on. I know you did great work for the American Apprenticeship Initiative projects over the last 5 years. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and how it relates to this work.
Thank you so much, Eric. Excuse me. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you today to talk about how to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in advanced manufacturing registered apprenticeships. So just really quickly, some information about the Office of Apprenticeship for those who may not be as familiar with our work. We are charged with promoting, regulating, and supporting registered apprenticeship under the National Apprenticeship Act of 1937, which, as we know, is in the process of the reauthorization. So as a part of this work, we also work a lot with our colleagues in the state apprenticeship agencies in the promotion and of their programs as well. Additionally, we support career seekers, employers, and educators that are seeking to engage with registered apprenticeship. And so we do work on both sides of the supply and demand side of apprenticeship. And since 2017, DOL has invested over $575 million to expand apprenticeship, especially in emerging and high growth sectors, and to increase access to registered apprenticeships for underrepresented populations. And so that is a kind of 30,000 foot view of what we're doing in the Office of Apprenticeship. My team specifically is responsible for the marketing and promotion activities on behalf of the National Office for Registered Apprenticeship. And so we really are working to connect folks on both sides, if it's employers, educational institutions, also folks inside of the DOL sphere to different activities across registered apprenticeship across various sectors. So as Susie mentioned, stakeholder engagement is a big focus of our work today. And so we are very closely focused on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sasha. Hey, Brad, let's go over to our friend Brad with AFL-CIO working for American Institute. Brad, you've been around for a while, banging around these apprenticeship programs, and have a great deal of knowledge about them, particularly as a former, I think you were a machinist, right, or whatever you were. But you certainly have a lot to add to the day. So tell us a little bit about what AFL-CIO working for American Institute is up to, and tell us a little bit about some of the work you guys are doing, which I know as a previous intermediary for DOL and a grantee on a couple of other projects. Tell us a little bit about what you all are doing today.
Well, thank you, Eric, and thanks to JFF for co-hosting with us. And Sasha, thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate your participation. Yes, Eric, 44 years in the auto workers. Started out with that assembler wisdom, which is righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It's one of the things you learn. And, the Working for America Institute and the Industrial Union Council, sort of two parts of the AFL-CIO, really honed in on manufacturing. And, of course, befitting organized labor, and especially in the manufacturing sector with the orientation of the unions there, really concerned, wanting to do more, needing to do more, seeing the need to do more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Manufacturing is a sector that has sort of gone backwards in the past couple of decades. If you went back 25, 30 years ago, African Americans were overrepresented in manufacturing. Today, they are underrepresented in manufacturing. Women are about 23% of the manufacturing workforce, and they tend to be concentrated in technical and professional management occupations and not in production occupations or in craft occupations. That's just a big hole in the manufacturing workforce, And it's a big lack of opportunity for women and for African Americans in manufacturing. So we clearly have to do better. And the first part of that is central to everything we do, is just to be intentional about saying the things I just said, and to really understand that if you aren't helping companies find the diverse workforce they need, and we do a lot of work as JFF does as an intermediary, you're really not helping them find the talent that's out there for them. And you're not helping communities move forward. You're not helping people get the opportunity that they need. So there's a lot of things we should be doing around apprenticeship in manufacturing in general, and to include diversity and inclusion, but starting with realizing what the facts are on the ground today and being intentional about doing something about it is my number one suggestion.
Yeah, I agree with that intentionality. It just takes a little focus and attention and leaning into these issues. Many of us are out there doing this work, but leaning into the equity issue is really important. So, Brad, I'm going to stick with you for my next question, then I'll go back to Sasha. So, as we look at manufacturing today, and look at, in a post-COVID world and an economic downturn, change of administrations, I mean, this is a really interesting time in workforce in general, economic mobility in general. What are some of your observations about where you think manufacturers in general are, union or non-union? What do you think some of their immediate concerns are? And do you think we can get them to take up more apprenticeships, particularly in the equity side of things? Brad?
I really want manufacturers to sort of stretch their thinking around what apprenticeship is and what it can do for them. And in so many cases, people think about, well, I need an electrician, or I need a maintenance mechanic, or it's craft occupation oriented. The vast majority of apprenticeships in manufacturing are around craft occupations. And there are a lot of high tech things happening in craft occupations. But in order to make apprenticeship more accessible, and in order to give people a chance to come in at an entry level or a step or two up from entry level, we need to expand the number of apprenticeable occupations in manufacturing so that there is a career ladder, so that there are stackable credentials. And then I think the second piece is really thinking about how do we get manufacturers, companies in general, say outside of construction, you can enter an apprenticeship in construction through the union, and then you're off and running and you have a way to get hired. We need a routine in manufacturing where manufacturers can be assured that if they deal with a community college or an intermediary like JFF or Way, that they are going to get the person they need, and the person needs to know if they put the effort in that there's a chance, or a super high chance, really, that they get a job out of it. And if we can sort of make that connection, the labor market will work a lot better in manufacturing. Apprenticeship is a part of that.
Great, thank you. So Sasha, from your perch at DOL, you have a very interesting view of what's going on across the country, certainly with what the grantees are doing or contractors are doing in the space of manufacturing. You have a wealth of information from overseeing the AAI, the very successful AAI, the first real investment in apprenticeship that this country has made in 40 years. So, there was a lot to learn from that. But from your perch up there at DOL, what are you seeing out in the field? What are you seeing some of your grantees and contractors doing? And what are you hearing are effective ways, particularly as we lean into equity and inclusion?
So there are a lot of, Eric, as you indicated, a lot of exciting things that we're seeing. As you mentioned, the AAI grantees really did lay the groundwork for a lot of the innovations that we're seeing today in, not just advanced manufacturing, but all sectors. And, those really are continuing in this post-COVID world. And so, for example, there's Susie had shared some examples from some of our grantees, the Idaho Department of Labor. There's some things that they're seeing that employers really are still seeking to grow and train their workforce. Of course, the issues that they're facing don't, necessarily stop just because of COVID. There is still the aging workforce that they're dealing with. And so they have, Idaho, for example, has seen an increased interest in registered apprenticeships, not, for traditional kind of advanced manufacturing positions like CNC operators, but they're also seeing the need for other administrative positions like purchasing agents, office managers, to go back to South Carolina. Even their manufacturers are continuing to adopt and expand apprenticeship programs. South Carolina registered 43 new programs in 2020 and approved 9 new occupations, including supervisory occupations. And they are seeing that large international employers are moving forward with youth apprenticeship as well in the industry. So they're seeking, they're tapping, continuing to target that population. Additionally, some of the other observations that we've been learning from some of our partners during the first months of the pandemic, manufacturers' focus really was on maintaining basic operations and safety. But then as activity picked up over the summer, there was a corresponding increase in hiring and renewed interest in workforce development and apprenticeship, especially in automotive and textiles production. And so one lasting impact and kind of positive outgrowth from the pandemic is that many employers have invested in new technologies to be more efficient and will require a workforce with the corresponding skills to be able to manage and work with this new technology. And then also just something that we heard from JFF, we heard from you all that employers are in the past 6 months, employers have come back to request technical assistance in developing or expanding programs, targeting occupations like machine operators and maintenance mechanics, as well as in higher level supervisory positions. And then just to list one other another example that I learned about recently over in Rhode Island, and this was one of our AI grantees. What their initiative called We Make Rhode Island is recruiting Rhode Islanders displaced by COVID to launch new careers that start with registered apprenticeship. And so one of those programs includes production technician, machinist, CNC machinist, and tool maker. And then they also offer a mid-level career apprenticeship in OHS safety training, and they just launched an industrial sewing apprenticeship. And so those are just a few of the examples that show that the demand is not decreasing at this point, even though there may have been that kind of interim period where everyone was just kind of trying to get their bearings. It seems like a lot of the employers have kind of regained their footing, and they're seeking to, really continue advancing and make progress with their registered apprenticeship programs.
That's great. And these are both labor programs and non-labor programs. Is that right?
All across the board.
Mm-hmm. Okay, super. So Brad, we only got another minute or two left, but I wanted to ask you specifically, are there any initiatives or efforts? I know this issue of equity and inclusion is built into the fabric of the AFL-CIO. I know that's been an interest for your leadership to advance that, and we'll be hearing from Liz Schuler from AFL-CIO later on today. But just wanted to get your perspective on either any initiatives that you all are doing or that you're connected with or that you're personally working on to advance the equity and inclusion or addressing the post-COVID recovery period.
We have done a couple of things that involve working with the constituency groups inside the AFL-CIO. So we have the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, for example. They have local chapters all over the place. And we've started doing webinars and really trying to tune in the local leadership, because so much of what happens in the labor movement happens at those local unions, the folks that are bargaining the agreements, and we really are pushing them to get tuned up on what it takes to bargain for equity, and to make sure that equity is included in all their skill programs. And that's one of the things about registered apprenticeship, right? If I register an apprenticeship, I need to have an EEOC plan embedded inside of there. So as we talk about the value of registered apprenticeship, just realizing that it comes with all these standards, that we should exploit the requirements for those standards to raise our own performance. And then the last thing I'll say is we're really starting to work with Chicago Women into Trades, who everybody knows has worked a lot in the construction sector, and in pulling them into our work in manufacturing. In fact, we are a sub-grantee to them, to a grant they have, that we really want to stand up a bigger push to get women into factory jobs.
Outstanding. Outstanding, Brad. Thank you. So, later on today, we're going to be hearing from some other friends of ours in women in manufacturing and from the National Association of Manufacturers Manufacturing Institute. So we'll be drilling down on these issues. But in terms of setting the stage, Sasha, great work the Office of Apprenticeship is doing, not only driving funds out there, but providing guidance. And I know in all of your projects, DOL is encouraging this whole diversity and equity thing. But we really have to really be intentional, as Brad would say, about how we do that. And, I'm the Working for America Institute has a lot of great resources and partners across the country. And so reaching out to Brad or Beth or any of the folks with that group, we've got a lot of folks on the phone, Brad. I'm sure you wouldn't mind if a couple of hundred of them gave you a call to get your insights on it. But you guys have a lot going on across the country. And I would say to all of you listening, right, there's a lot of, Brad said that a lot of the work with labor unions is local and regional, right, through labor councils and some of those projects. And I always tell new projects we're working on, reach out to the existing programs in your community to make those partnerships. Maybe you can create pathways into their programs, prepare people to apply for registered apprenticeships, and maybe you can do some pre-apprenticeship or pre-development work. But having those local relationships with the labor councils are very helpful and useful to this effort. So with that, I want to thank Sasha and Brad for making the time to join us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Miriam, I think. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it. Miriam?
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you so much for a really robust discussion. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Brad. And thank you, Eric, for leading us through this discussion. And I love, they really teed us up really well for our next conversation on creating an equitable manufacturing apprenticeship. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the session, Allison Grealis, President and founder of Women in Manufacturing Association. Hi, Allison. I'd also like to introduce Randy Berth, Chief Innovations Officer from the Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership, Big Step. I'd also like to bring on Carolyn Lee, Executive Director from the Manufacturing Institute, and then Letitia McCain, Director of Education from the Apprentice School at Newport News Shipbuilding. Allison, I'll turn it over to you now.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Miriam, for the introductions and invitation to lead this important panel today. As was presented, my name is Allison Grealis, and I am the founder and president of the Women in Manufacturing Association and Education Foundation. Our association is the only national year-round association dedicated to supporting, promoting, and inspiring women in manufacturing careers. And present day, we represent more than 6,200 individual members and are connected to more than 1,000 unique manufacturing companies of all different sizes. We also power local WIM chapters now in 27 states, and in 2020 delivered 186 national and local programs, which connected to 9,000 participating attendees. Our largest program is our annual WIM Summit, which will be held in a hybrid format this October, the October 4th through the 6th, virtually and safely in person in Cleveland, Ohio. And beginning in the fall of 2020, we have been an outreach partner working with JFF to recruit more diverse candidates to registered apprenticeship programs, and we really appreciate the opportunity, again, to be part of today's discussion. I'm excited to be joined by such an expert industry panel today to discuss the topic of creating an equitable manufacturing, or creating equitable manufacturing apprenticeships. Our panelists today include Randy Berth, Chief Innovations Officer with the Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership, Carolyn Lee, Executive Director of the Manufacturing Institute, and Letitia McCain, Director of Education, the Apprenticeship School at Newport News Shipbuilding. Please help me in welcoming Randy, Carolyn, and Letitia. Why don't we start off today's discussion with getting to know each of our panelists a little bit better and to learn a little bit more about their organization and/or company and how they're connected and also driving workforce development both at the local and national level. So Randy, why don't we first begin with you, and if you could share a little bit about your company and highlight or your organization and highlight some of the work you do related to apprenticeship and workforce development.
Well, thank you, and I'm very honored to be invited to this panel. My name is Randy Berth. I am the Chief Innovations Officer at WRTP Big Step. I was actually the first full-time staff that started a 3-month experiment about 30 years ago. The experiment really was, can we help our manufacturers keep and grow jobs, because they were actually losing business because their current workers did not have the skills to accept new technology and new work processes. And the new workers coming in, there was no confidence level. So they were intentionally not growing and not taking on new business. So this partnership was created. Our tagline is industry-led, worker-centered, and community-focused, that really starts with the jobs and then builds partnerships and programs around those jobs and those needs. We do a needs assessment of the industry every year or two, and finding and preparing qualified workers is a key, always comes up as a business need, along with upgrading the skills of their current workers. And, you know, with the aging retirements, I think you don't take rookies from the outside to replace retirees. So how do we upgrade the skills of our current workers becomes such a big need for our businesses right now. And so one of our big projects is, and it's been mentioned a couple times today, is the Industrial Manufacturing Technician Apprenticeship, which was created. We facilitated our employers coming together to kind of say, what are the core foundational skills that all advanced manufacturing needs? And we brought together, you know, employers that made beer and employers that made motorcycles, and it didn't matter if you were in wood or metal, but all kinds of sectors of the manufacturing economy, and also the job classifications. We had welders, we had machining, we had all of them there to really say, can we build on, you know, we have a registered youth apprenticeship, we have a certified pre-apprenticeship, but really how do we build that career ladder between, I haven't worked in manufacturing to production and production to the higher occupations.
Excellent. Thank you, Randy, for that introduction. I know we'll talk more specifically on the great work that your organization is doing. So next, why don't we turn to you, Carolyn, if you could share a little bit about the Manufacturing Institute and your organization's current key initiatives as they relate to workforce development.
Sure. Thank you, Allison. And thank you for having me here today. Happy to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is, of course, the future of the manufacturing workforce. The Manufacturing Institute is the workforce development and education partner of the National Association of Manufacturers. The NAM is the nation's largest industrial trade association, representing over 14,000 manufacturing companies, from the biggest of the big to the smallest of the small, in every state and county across the country. The Institute, which has been around for about 40 years, is focused on, oddly enough, workforce development. And what we do is really, we have our mission of inspiring, educating, and empowering the manufacturing workforce of today and tomorrow. We do that through research and best practices, which drive our programs and initiatives to help focus on key populations, which include women, students, current workers, and veterans. And our goal really is to make sure that we are continually building that pipeline and raising awareness about the opportunity in modern manufacturing. I grew up in a manufacturing family, and I remember when manufacturing was, as they call it, you know, the 3 Ds, dirty, dark, and dangerous, but still thought it was amazing, the fact that we make things, right? If you ask anybody who's in manufacturing, what do you do? They light up when they talk about what do they make. Personally, as fascinating as everything we make is, I love watching and seeing the machinery that makes, right? That makes all of our products. And that is part of the wonder of modern manufacturing. And it's our job really to bring this to life. The workforce is the number one concern for manufacturers. It's been the number one concern for 11 of the past 13 quarters, according to the NAM Quarterly Outlook Survey. And really our focus is how do we make sure that people understand the opportunities, that these are good, high-paying jobs with long career trajectory, and that it is not a manual job, and therefore it is open to all. And that's where the diversity and inclusion initiatives that we've launched in the last several years have been so critical as we change the perception of manufacturing. Because as we have this problem, the Institute and Deloitte have long done the skills gap study, which is kind of the landmark study on manufacturing sector and our workforce needs. We found that we have 2.4 million jobs that could go unfilled by 2028 because we don't have the people with the skills. And so, the thing is we've got to bring them in and light the spark. And we do that through our attraction programs. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. But we also have to do it through the role model and the mentor. So when you come to a facility, you need to see people you identify with. And that's where diversity and inclusion becomes such a key element of this. But we got to do the skilling. And that's, again, where apprenticeship comes in. So happy to be here and to talk about all these initiatives with you all. And it's great to be on a panel of all ladies. It's not common. So it's great to see everybody, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. And lastly, let's get introduced to Letitia. If you could share a little bit about your background, your company, and some of the key work that your organization's doing as it relates to apprenticeship and workforce development.
Thank you, Allison. My name is Letitia McCain. I'm Director of Education at one of the oldest apprentice schools. We've been around for 100 years. You can actually visit our website at as.edu. We're excited about what we're doing in the apprentice school, especially in the midst of a pandemic. We are a 100-year-old brick and mortar school. We have 19 programs. We have 8 optional programs where students can earn associate's and bachelor's degrees. And so we had to kind of make a paradigm shift from face-to-face instruction to online instruction. And to work with our unions and to make sure that our students can continue to matriculate through our program in the midst of the pandemic. So we're excited about the fact that we transitioned to online classes and also introduce augmented and virtual reality skills training within our program. We have 6 Division III college programs, athletic programs. And so we compete from football all the way to women's basketball. So pretty unique in what we do at the Apprentice School. We are owned and operated by Newport News Shipbuilding. So all of our students, they come in as employees of the company. It's amazing to see the vast array of students that actually come through our doors, from the 18-year-old that's making $20 an hour all the way up to for instance, the encumbered worker who wants to reskill and upskill and to want to move into production management. We're considered the leadership factor of our company. So majority of our students eventually become leaders and managers within our company. And so we're very intentional in preparing those individuals for those roles. So we have something that's called Frontline Fast, where we actually send students through a leadership development where they actually do makeup in positions as foreman or construction supervisors to prepare them for those leadership roles in the future. We're very intentional on diversity, and I'm very excited to be able to talk to you about some of the things that we're doing. In that space, we actually have a pre-apprenticeship program that we started last year to be able to reach back into the high schools to make sure that our curriculum is there and that we're being partners in every space that we can be partners in. So I'm excited about this conversation today and to share more about the Apprentice School.
Great, thank you, Letitia. I think that's a great introduction to our panelists, and I think we've got some great insights that can be had and shared from the group we've gathered today. And I likewise, Carolyn, love that it's an all-female panel, which is often rare for these industry conferences and events that we all get invited to. So why don't we hop into how the manufacturing workforce has changed? I know I started my career working with manufacturing companies more than 20 years ago, specifically with a lot of small to mid-sized privately held metal forming companies. And in looking at the demographics and the composition of that workforce back 20 years ago, I have seen changes, I'm sure many of you have as well, of kind of who's populating current roles and responsibilities, as well as when you look at the skills needed for current positions that are open in manufacturing. So from each of your perspectives, why don't we hop into kind of what is your observations, either from an organizational or company perspective of current workforce, and then as well, how does that differ from perhaps what the workforce looked like 5 to 10 years ago? So anyone want to hop right in?
Sure, I can start off with the kind of the big picture nationally. So, you know, we have made progress, right? When the Institute started our Step Women's Initiative back in 2012, we had done that after research with Deloitte again, where we found that one of the reasons why there were so few women in manufacturing was that they needed the role models and that mentorship and the network to find and to stay in manufacturing. And so we launched our Step Ahead initiative, and that was really to elevate those women leaders. At the time, we had 24% of the manufacturing workforce was women. And up until the Great Recession, it was at 29%. So we had made progress. I know that was through the strong efforts of the Institute and STEP, and of course, Allison, with what you've done with WIM as well. And together as a sector, we recognize that we need to do better. We need to do better and highlight those leaders and build those networks in those communities. And that's important in order to attract and retain the workforce. Every manufacturer wants to keep their workers. So the retention piece is really key, right? Today, we have 515,000 open jobs. That's the new JOLTS number that came out from Department of Labor last week. And so even at the height of the Great Recession, the recession last year due to COVID, and I know the first panel and Maria talked a little bit about this, and Eric, you know, we still had huge numbers of open jobs with 23 million Americans out of work. At one point last year, we had about 475,000 open jobs that same month. And so the reality is people aren't just wandering around with the skill sets that we need. And so we really need to have a deliberate focus. Now, I said before, I grew up in manufacturing. My dad and my grandfather, who has since passed away, but they used to talk about you just hang the sign on the door and people would come, right? And there is that kind of orientation, that framework, that memory inside manufacturing, but more and more we recognize we have to take proactive steps. As Letitia talked about, right, that's long proactive steps on part of their company with a 100-year-old apprenticeship program, but many companies have been doing this formally and informally, and so we have made progress, but there's still so much progress to be done because, of course, we have 515,000 open jobs. Driving that is, of course, the retirements of the baby boomers. Now, boomers are working longer, but about every 8 seconds a boomer retires. So that's the biggest reason why. But then we're also creating jobs. The shift of bringing more manufacturing back to the States is great, but it creates more open jobs. And so as you move people through, you know, we always talk to companies about their best next worker is their current employee that they upskill, because then they're making way for somebody who may be starting out more junior and be able to grow and progress through their program. So we have made progress. The workforce is more diverse today, but we still have a long way to go.
So I'm going to bring a little different perspective. I think that managing a 100-year-old school, it's actually very competitive to get into the apprentice school. So I'm going to talk from the apprentice school perspective because it's very competitive to get into the apprentice school. When I say competitive, we have about 200 slots and we have over 4,000 applicants a year. And so being around 100 years, we're generational. And so I'm just thinking about my background, 30 years in manufacturing experience as far as my dad, my grandfather. And so now it's basically passing on that legacy. So we have a lot of legacy within our school. And you ask students the question, particularly women. We have a lot of women who apply to our school. About 19% of our school is made up of women. And we asked them the question, well, why did you choose the apprentice school over a college or university? And so the first thing they say is, number one, I don't have the college debt when I finish. Number two, once I finish my apprenticeship, a 4-year apprenticeship, I'm making $60,000. And then, of course, so it all goes back to the money and socioeconomics. And so we've seen so many young people that have changed and transformed their lives because of apprenticeships. And so there are so many people that are lined up to be a part of these programs. And so to increase diversity and to increase equity in these spaces, having these types of programs allow us to be able to do that. And so individuals would say, when we think about the whole ecosystem, we just can't think about just manufacturing, just a small portion of manufacturing. We also have supply chain. We also have engineers. We have this whole different types of jobs that are available. So once we bring students through a 4-year apprenticeship, we tell them, if you want to earn your associate's degree and to go into supply chain management, then we have the skill sets that we will give you to be able to do that. And we do the same for engineering. So I think that, yeah, it's a total different look. I remember being the only woman in my department so many times. I used to brag, I had my own bathroom. Now I'm sharing my bathroom with 6 or 7 other women. And so it's exciting to be able to see other women in this space and to be able to move the needle. I think that we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and I'll just add, when I started in manufacturing, there was one Rosie the Riveter left that the guys hadn't gotten rid of. And now in our most recent needs assessment of over 220 firms, 78% of our union firms have women in production jobs on the floor.
That's excellent.
So it's not good enough, but it's moving. It's moving.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a general sentiment, it seems, is that, progress has been made in the last 5-10 years, but there's still lots of opportunity for additional improvement as we look forward. So we talked a little bit, and I think the panel prior to us as well talked a little bit about kind of the pressing needs that manufacturing companies have as it relates to workforce development and talent. So either from an observational perspective, having worked with manufacturing companies, and or if you're a manufacturer like you, Letitia, direct, what are those most pressing problems and challenges that you're facing as it relates to workforce development?
I think from my perspective, especially being on the front end of this apprenticeship pipeline, we realized that retention was an issue. We had a retention problem. And so although we are recruiting a diverse population, how do we retain those individuals and make sure that they're matriculating and they're getting the promotions and the jobs and they're actually completing their apprenticeship? So we realized that mathematics was an issue within our school as far as barriers for success for minority candidates. And so we were very intentional. We put some things in place that prior to students enrolling in our school, that they got the mathematics background. We provided them with math packets. We partnered with local community colleges to get them the tutoring that they needed. We even opened our doors for tutoring. We put tutoring online. We realized that we had to do some things that were different and unique to be able to retain. And when we did that, we saw our retention rates double. And so we were very excited about that outcome and realized that, okay, so how do we go even further into K-12 and to be able to do that? And so we have a night school, especially for those incumbent workers that need to be upskilled in math, because it's just not the 18-year-old coming out of high school. But if I've been working in a job for 20 years and I've never taken math in 20 years, then I need to be reskilled and retooled in mathematics as well. So I think that assessing and reassessing those things that's necessary for people to be successful, I think that we have to be able to do that and have to be fluid enough to change if we need to change to be able to ensure that individuals are successful and complete their apprenticeship.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I would say from our employers that, they need to stay in business, they need to be competitive, they need to train their workers, and they need to do all of this all at the same time. So as a workforce intermediary, and one of the things when we even designed the IMT apprenticeship, it was how do we minimize production loss and maximize the training and education of workers. And, it's really taken off because Wisconsin's a very apprenticeship state. And in over 100 years, the IMT apprenticeship has scaled up quicker than any other apprenticeship has in its history. It's now in well over 20 states and there's over 1,000 apprentices. And in Wisconsin, it's the 7th best occupation for women. It's the 7th best occupation for people of color. And, it's definitely not good enough, but it's in double digits of women and people of color that are in the apprenticeship. And what we're seeing is once you start that learning in those production jobs, you do advance into associate degrees or other skilled trade apprenticeships, or some just stay where they're at, but it gives them the confidence to work together. And I think part of the whole COVID and, the problems with maintaining production while people are sick and have to be distanced and everything else made learning more important to do in a variety of training methods. So whether that is delivery of, related instruction in a classroom or on a computer or through Zoom, or, how the on-the-job training is when you can't be so close, I think it's really helped expedite more opportunities and more flexibility to help our employers do the right thing by using apprenticeship and diversifying their workforce.
Absolutely. We've all learned a lot from COVID. It's been a traumatic time for everybody, but manufacturers have had to stand up because it is the arsenal of democracy turned the arsenal of healthcare that's going to get us through this. And what we have done, and we've learned, and both the previous speakers talked about bringing in new technologies as we look to train. We've done that in our own Heroes Make America program, where we're training transitioning service members and fully separated veterans, military spouses, Guard and Reserve in manufacturing skills, and then helping build a pipeline for them into manufacturing careers. We've had to bring on VR and AR training so that they're able to engage even though we can't be on site. And I know that's something that our FAME apprenticeship program that we now operate, Toyota had founded it, but transitioned it over to the Institute about a year and a half ago. It's growing by leaps and bounds. The interest of manufacturers is continually expanding. The outcomes of that program have been fantastic. And there was a Brookings Opportunity America study that came out last fall highlighting some of the outcomes, which is over 85% success rate. And the graduates being 85% of them being hired by those companies that sponsor them. Now, some of those programs are registered apprenticeships, some of them aren't. Manufacturers need an all of the above solution, but the thing that is common is that our skill sets are evolving too. And I talk about this because it's kind of demystifying. Everybody thinks, okay, you have to be an engineer or very STEM. We also need problem solving. Every single company will say they need people who can show up on time and pass a drug test. That's like the number one thing, but it's also they need people who can be trained, right? And that idea about lifelong learning, as you both talked about. And so, even as the industry continues to shift and change and more automation comes in and more technology comes in, the skill sets that are human, the critical thinking, the communication, the teamwork that are inherent to manufacturing success become even more important. And I like to highlight that because those are accessible things, right? It's not, I was never going to be an engineer, not my forte. Letitia, what you said before about math, I have elementary school age kids and they ask me about math and I'm like, you're teaching it different. You're learning it differently than I remember. So I'm not even going to get involved, right? And that's 6th grade math. So we all can appreciate that. But the teamwork and the communication, the critical thinking and the problem solving and that agility to do those things are really high demand skills that they can learn through the earn and learn experience of applied learning, right? And that's what makes earn and learn models so valuable and accessible, right? It's not that you just go off and learn in theory and then come back a couple of years later and put it to life. It's really about how do we do this in a really functional process and do that simultaneously.
Excellent. Great insight shared. And the thrust of today's conversation is largely around diversity and how does that connect to apprenticeship programs and how are companies using that to recruit a more diverse workforce. So I wanted to open it up for the group to share how you have seen directly manufacturing companies, how they've used apprenticeship programs and formal registered apprenticeship programs to increase the diversity in their manufacturing workforce. So any examples that any of you could share about how the use of apprenticeship programs has helped to recruit and retain a diverse workforce?
Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that we in the apprentice school, we actually have 6 collegiate sports teams. And so I know that's kind of strange for an apprenticeship school to have athletics. But we're very fortunate to be able to, when we look at our demographics, about 40% of our students are actually minority students. And so we recruit heavily for our football and our basketball teams. And so we're fortunate to be able to have that pipeline. We also have a pre-apprenticeship program that we've started that we're actually touching about 25 different high schools. We're actually doing this in an online modality, and so being able to do it virtually, we're attracting more and more minority students. We're actually partnering with local HBCUs and community colleges. And so we realized that partnerships and collaboration has been very beneficial for us, not only in the state of Virginia, but also in the region. So as we continue to grow, especially in the area of growing our female pipeline, we've seen our female pipeline grow from 2 percentage points from when I started about 3 years ago. So we've been very intentional in making sure that we foster these relationships and partnerships. And in that, we're seeing our pipeline grow, and we're very excited about the future.
And I would just say, you know, as I mentioned before, when we follow up to the needs assessment by building, you know, projects, partnerships, you know, adding different partners. If you were an HR manager and you really just wanted good people and you wanted to work with agencies, can you imagine that you'd have to work with one agency that serves veterans and one agency that serves dislocated workers and one agency that serves youth? And, you know, like for us, we have no boundaries. So we can just serve the employers wherever they are, and we can recruit and advance people from wherever they are. But we build all these partnerships and then we communicate back so that the employer doesn't have 40 other community organizations calling them and saying, how's my person doing? And is there something I can do? And so as an intermediary that really serves the employers, we really do accommodate a lot of different community organizations and partners that allow us the flexibility to not be restrictive to a type of person, but really to be able to do who's the most likely to succeed and the best for this business right now. And the end result is, as I mentioned before, so our numbers show that, you know, we have high percentages of women and people of color that are getting in the apprenticeship.
So I just got an ominous, your computer's going to restart in a minute because of a desktop app push on fixing something. So I'm going to switch. So don't mind me when I jump away for a second. But the thing is that I will say is partnerships, and I think Letitia, you just mentioned this, how we reach out, and that is, and you're right, Randy, it is cumbersome, and we have made it more cumbersome as we seek to add more layers to the solution set here. But what we really need to do is work with partners in order to reach out and to reach especially underrepresented communities, because those ambassadors are so key to doing that, and that's how we're going to be successful. So if I disappear in 30 seconds, I'll be right back.
Okay. We'll know where Carolyn's going.
Yes.
Well,
Technology.
Yes, technology is always our best friend. Of course, critical points, right, and crucial moments. So we know companies are using apprenticeships to help increase, or they're great vehicles and successful vehicles, as has been shared, to increase diversity in the manufacturing workforce. There's lots of research around why companies should be recruiting a diverse workforce, why there's value in having diverse leadership, diverse employees at every level. So perhaps some of you could share some of the data and research that surrounds, and perhaps some of the reasons why your company is specifically targeting and recruiting a diverse workforce to your organization.
Well, for us, I would say, you know, one of the problems in manufacturing is it doesn't have the skills and wage match that some of the other industries do. So high wage employers will have thousands of applicants, and they have to sort through who's the best that we want to bring into our facility or to advance. And low wage employers, like, they don't have a lot of, you know, people applying or qualified candidates. And so kind of helping our employers understand that you can't get brain surgeons for burger flipper wages, but you can pay more and get more skills. And so looking at how that works and designing programs like the IMT that can accommodate high wage employers and medium wage employers, I think really helps, because at least none of the employers I work with are saying, you know, just send me white guys, or I only want to advance white guys. They really want the most qualified people, and they're happy to take people that aren't a white guy.
So just to add to that, I think that from my perspective, in 100 years, the apprentice school, Newport Shipbuilding, hired me, an African-American female and a woman, as the director of the apprentice school. So it took 100 years for them to get it right. So, but what's exciting about that is not only the president of our company, of Newport Shipbuilding, is a female, Now, our sister company, Ingalls, just hired a female to be the president and CEO. So our company is very intentional in making sure that the leadership represents the faces and people that make up the workforce. So, you have about 60% of our labor, our hourly workforce are African American. And you have about 45% of our leadership, our foremen, general foremen that are on the deck plate that are African American. So, but it has not happened overnight. It's been a process. It's been intentional work. It's been standing up inclusion and diversity department within our company to make sure that we're intentional. It's being partnering with different people and being in different places where we're able to touch African American employees, applicants, and so standing up different aspects of our company to recruit and to retain African American workers. I think that we've been very intentional in that, and because of that, we're now seeing the fruits of our labor. And so it's very exciting to be a part of a company that's very intentional about that and embrace diversity. And so as the company continues to move and continue to grow, we're continuing to see the first in different places. I was just able to hire my first African American female craft lead instructor. So now that we're in places, it's up to us to be able to continue to move that needle and to ensure that more women have access and more people of color have access.
Oh, Carolyn, I think you might be muted.
That's a great example and underscores that idea of what the role model can do, right? And that's why the work that we've done through STEP, engaging, about 10,000 women just in the last 2 years on how to engage, and then highlighting we've now awarded about 1,200 women with the Step Ahead Award over the last 9 years, and really highlighting their work and giving that role model is so important, because seeing women in those places is so relatable. But this is really common in what what Letitia just laid out is really common across most large manufacturers now, are making deliberate commitments on diversity and inclusion, on expanding their workforce. Actually, Union Pacific, we just announced a 3-year grant award from them where they're looking to double the number of women in their workforce by 2030. And so we're working with them on pipeline development from students, female, girls in 8th, 9th grade, all the way through the track, connecting them into our STEP program, into helping that they can become women in manufacturing more broadly in the sector. And so it's connecting these things, not putting them in a silo. How do we reach back and make sure that students, right, don't lose that spark and they can have those career awareness? So our Careers on Track initiative is going to be really, we hope, a role model for how manufacturers can do this going forward. But, also I have to mention on the whole topic of diversity and inclusion, the NAM in September announced a pledge for action where, and this one's a bold one, that by 2025, manufacturers commit to taking 50,000 tangible actions to increase equity and parity for unrepresented communities, creating 300,000 pathways to job opportunities for Black people and all people of color. And that the ultimate goal is that in doing so, manufacturing will reflect the diversity of the overall U.S. workforce by 2030. Now, that is a pretty high bar, and we are getting, and the MI is supporting the NAM in this work, collecting the pledges, and through our diversity and inclusion pillar, collecting best practices and helping them learn from each other. Because what we hear from manufacturers every day is that they want to know about what others are doing in the production environment to help close both the inclusion gap and the equity gap. And so it's really how do we collect all that's happening, but also not make the bar to entry so high. Some companies have really diverse hourly workforce, and that's terrific, but they have less diversity in there when they go supervisory and management tracks. That is as important to improve and to focus on, and your leadership goals, as you just pointed out, Letitia, as it is to make sure that who you're recruiting on the front end, because then you have those people to continue to grow. And so manufacturers of all sizes are making commitments in order to really double down on this effort, because it is not only the right thing to do, it is a mathematical impossibility to have the workforce you need if you are only talking to a shrinking segment of the population. population. And since our average worker is, I think it's about 44 years old in manufacturing, and that's just continually getting older, we need to do a better job and to reach all of the population to close the skills gap. And so these deliberate efforts are just critical in getting us to where we need to be.
Excellent. So as you touched around the topic of kind of role modeling and how companies are recruiting and that need to change the way that they're recruiting a new generation of talent, what are some of the things that you've seen companies do or shift or change or create as it relates to recruiting individuals to their workplace and to their facilities and to their opportunities, as well as how they look to individuals to advance, to develop, and to train? So have you seen any specific examples, or Letitia, maybe your company has changed the way it's recruiting and looking at advancement pathways within your organization?
I think that's a great point, Allison. I think mentoring, I mean, it's like when we think about how do we make sure that we're preparing the next generation, because that's what it's all about, leaving that legacy where people can actually matriculate and can have actually a career ladder. I mean, coming in from the entry level all the way up to if they want to be CEO, and how does that look in between? And so our company, we've actually put in place all sorts of leadership training and development. We also have a mentoring program. We started a mentoring program within the apprentice school because I realized that sitting in a lot of meetings that some of our students, they finished the apprentice school, but a lot of our female graduates were not being promoted. And so they were putting in for jobs, but they were not being promoted. And once they were being promoted, they didn't have anyone that looked like them that they could talk to or mentor them. So we actually put in a program within our school to be able to look at our graduates, bring them back, and have what we call just a talk about how we can help them and prepare them to continue their careers, and how we can partner and match them with different mentors within our company to be able to assist them with that. Even in our pre-apprenticeship program, what we do have in place, we have a lot of our apprentices that are now mentors to the pre-apprentices who are in high school. So last year we were able to, out of our pilot program, bring in 8 of our students who are part of our pre-apprenticeship program, and they are now apprentices. And one of the things they told me was like, well, it was very important to have that mentor to help me to get from high school into my apprenticeship. And now that I'm in my apprenticeship, I have someone that I know that I can call on, so when things get tough, I'm not out here by myself. So we put mentoring in all aspects, from our pre-apprenticeship into our apprenticeship, into our post-apprenticeship, into employment, and continuing up that career ladder, and making sure that we have people that we can call and pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. How can you help me?
You know, one thing I'll add into that, you know, and reverse mentorships too, are another thing that I know we have a couple of great examples of companies that have put those into place as well. You know, another thing I'll add though is coming out of the pandemic, Fleischman's public relations study about people's sentiment. People have high confidence in their employer. And so one thing as we talk to companies, especially large companies, as they seek to recruit, they're really having a strong focus on their values, on their commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion, on telling their story as a steward of their employees and the thing that they do. And that is particularly important and persuasive to the millennials and the Gen Zs after them, that they care about who they're working for. And so, you know, as you think about how you go out and recruit the next generation, yes, the skills, yes, the upskilling, yes, the continual investment in the individual is so key, but what the company stands for has never been more important, I think. And, you know, particularly after last summer, after George Floyd's killing, the companies that stepped forward and made strong statements, that resonated. And, you know, more and more companies are looking to the diversity and equity and inclusion statements and making the commitment, but making it more than just a press release, and making sure that they're putting effort behind it. It really matters as we poll and we seek out that next generation. Those things matter because they want to make sure that the people they're going to work for cares about the things that they care about.
Randy, anything to add on that topic?
No.
Okay. So there's a
I
question.
guess I will. Okay, so having someone that looks like you is really important. And we had some of our companies are allowing their journeyman workers to go out and talk to the schools. And one talked to me the other day, and she was like, Randy, all of the young women came up to me because everybody was talking about engineering and all these other things. And it was really the apprenticeship and what I'm doing that made more sense to them, that they could get out of school, get a job, earn $1 and advance. And so I think that's kind of important. And there's just not enough of us, out there to do mentoring or to be the face of the industry out in the community or in the high schools to say, manufacturing, we have good jobs, and they're not all dirty and icky. There's a lot of, good opportunities. So try one.
Yeah. And I think echoing that, it's very true. You can't be what you can't see. And so we've been very committed since inception 10 and a half years ago to really showcase stories, for example, of women at different levels and layers within manufacturing careers. So we have a series called Hear Her Story. We feature women at all levels of manufacturing. We actually are bringing it to life with a podcast later this month. And, we're excited as well. We launched a new Women in Production program that starts this fall. And, the goal is for those women who are in that program, which we believe will be about 100 in our first cohort, to hear from women who were formerly in production. How did they rise the ranks? How did they start at an hourly rate? And how did they grow within their company, organization, and the industry to have a very successful career? To help inspire, to help women kind of see themselves in that future next advancement or next role or responsibility.
Allison, I gotta say, as much as we talk about the skills gap, and I hope you all will agree, as much as we talk about the skills gap, we got a perception problem, right? That is, to me, the tip of the spear, and we've got to tell a different story, and we've got to tell a story about the opportunity and the excitement and the things that we're making and why they're so cool, right? And that these are good, high-paying, career jobs, but you're not standing on a line punching a widget for 40 years and doing the same thing, right? It's not some bad B-roll from the 60s. And so, we really need to make sure that we are telling that story. We have our Creators Wanted initiative that we've launched with the NAM to change nationwide, to change the narrative around modern manufacturing and make it was supposed to be an experiential event all year long last year, but COVID changed and delayed us, so we're carrying that virtually. But that content is available to everybody. It's online. We have virtual events at least once a month, if not twice a month, and we're really trying to tell that story about why manufacturing, all kinds of manufacturing, is an exciting place to be. And I think that all of us telling these stories will make it, possible that we can stay competitive and make more things here.
Excellent. So we had a few chat questions. One was about research and as well materials. So we talked about the attraction piece of people into manufacturing, ideally recruiting them into registered apprenticeship programs. Are there specific areas of collateral research? What are your companies using to share the business case for why diversity matters in manufacturing, as well as materials that highlight modern manufacturing careers? Are there any that you folks could cite to our audience or share where people could go for more information?
Sure, creatorswanted.org. There's all this content we've created so far, stories, videos, both for parents, because we got to influence the parents, of course. They're the biggest influencer after the student's own experience that chooses what makes them choose their career path. But that everything's available there. We also have some great materials under the Manufacturing Day tab, another way to get people out. And then at the manufacturinginstitute.org, our diversity and inclusion pillar has a public set of collection of best practices and also content to help manufacturers as they progress on their own journey for diversity inclusion and of course recruitment is part of that.
Excellent. Well, I know we only have but a few minutes left together, and I wanted for each of you to be able to share just a few remarks and perhaps your sentiments on why should companies, if they're listening today, or individuals, if they're listening, who might be looking for a next opportunity, why should they consider a registered apprenticeship program or apprenticeship or adopting an apprenticeship model? So maybe let's start with you, perhaps, Randy, and then we'll work our way around.
That's so hard for me because it just makes sense. So I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to do that. But as I mentioned at our last needs assessment, of the 220 firms, only 46% are apprentice sponsors. And so they're not using it. And when we talked about, we've now become our a sponsor, a multi-employer, multi-union and non-union apprenticeship sponsor. 80% of the companies were like, oh, really? Well, then we like apprenticeship. We're just worried about all that paperwork and everything else. So if you guys are going to do that for us, then we want to do that. So I think, it goes back to what I said before. How do we create an environment to make it easier for them to do the right thing, to take the high road, to invest in their workers? And so that would be my number one thing, is let's make it easier for them, because manufacturing jobs can leave our country and we want to bring them back. We want to keep them here, and we should be doing everything we can in order to do that.
Great. How about next to you, Letitia?
I think I'm going to close with a story. So I've seen over and over situations where people who were in poverty, and once we recruited them and put them into an apprenticeship program, not only did it change their socioeconomic status, but it also changed the entire family dynamics, where 18-year-olds were bringing their sisters and brothers and now raising them to give them a better life and to give them a better situation. Also, I've seen situations with students in our school. They actually purchased their first home at 21 and moved their entire family, mother, father, from a poverty situation into now a better life. And so I think that in order for us to move the needle and to reach a more diverse audiences, it's actually changing people's lives for the better, and not only their life, but everybody around them is being impacted and changing their socioeconomic status. I mean, that is the best reason why I think any company should have an apprenticeship program.
Absolutely. Oh boy. Yes. And yes to everything you said as well, Randy. I mean, here's the thing, right? Manufacturing has the ability to bring everybody who's interested. We have 515,000 open jobs today, right? We have over 2 million jobs we're going to need to fill in the next 7 years. And so we need all comers to come and to find their opportunity, and skilling is a huge piece of that in order to raise their families and have their own future success, right? Manufacturing is a path to family supporting middle class jobs. And it's a really, really good one too, right? And in today's world, you have the benefit of saving the world while you're at it, right? And so, it's such a great opportunity. All of these programs are so essential. And the good news is manufacturers are paying attention. More are coming to the table in all flavors of programs. And whether it might not be a fully registered apprenticeship program and like the full boat, they are committed to training. Manufacturers, in one survey we did that we released last year this time, $26.2 billion were spent in 2019 on manufacturing training by employers of their current employees, right? And so there's a huge amount of money going into this because they know their people are the most important resource. And why apprenticeship? It makes perfect sense. Randy, you said it, right? You're earning while you're learning, you are not carrying the debt, and you have this opportunity for an amazing career with huge possibilities ahead of you. And so, I could go on all day, but I see that our program moderator came back, so I'll wind it down. But it's just a huge opportunity, and together as a sector, we can all come and make this change and make sure that manufacturing is successful here in the U.S.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the great dialogue discussion. Hopefully many people will have learned and listened with us live, and I think the session's recorded so they can access it afterwards. So thank you, Carolyn, Letitia, and Randy, and I'll pass it back over to Miriam.
Thank you so much. This was such a robust discussion, right? So thank you, Allison, for leading us through that discussion. Thank you, Letitia. Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, Randy, for all of your comments. One thing that really resonated for me was a comment that I think Allison made around, you can't be what you can't see. I just thought that was just such an important comment. So now I'd like to kind of lead us through our third panel of the day. I'd like to introduce Building Up to the Future panel. I'd like to reintroduce Eric Sellers now, who will moderate the discussion. Eric is the head of JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning and a senior advisor. I'd like to also introduce Dane Lynn, Vice President of Immigration, Workforce, Education, and Business of the Business Roundtable. I'd like to introduce Petra Mitchell, President and CEO of Catalyst Connection. And I'd like to bring on Secretary Treasurer of the AFL-CIO, Liz Schuler. I think you're muted, Eric.
Of course I was. I was just testing you, Miriam, just testing you. Greetings, everyone. And Liz, Dane, and Petra, thanks so much for joining us today. It's so good to see you all again. Liz, it's been a while, so great to see you again. So happy you could join us today. So, this has been a sort of interesting and robust conversation. We're coming down to the end, team. So those of you listening in, so bear with us a little bit more. And we will be recording this, so we will continue to have access for anything that you may have missed on this. But let's continue this conversation and pivot just a little bit. Hold on, as soon as I find my place here. Here we go. And just focus a little bit more on drilling down on equity, and as Brad put it earlier today, the intentionality of equity. But before we do that, let's just get to know our panelists real quick. So Liz Schuler, I want to start with you. Liz is the Secretary Treasurer, I think that's still your title, of the AFL-CIO national group, which means she has a great bird's eye view of what's going on around the country, and I suppose probably the world in some of these issues. So Liz, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what you do at AFL-CIO and what some of your recent work has been.
Sure. Hi, Eric. Good to see you, of course. Hello, everyone out there. And I wanted to say to Dane and Petra, I'm really excited to be on this panel with you. We've crossed paths many times. And I wanted to thank Maria and Jeff and everyone at JFF, of course, Susie Levine, for holding this conference. And I know we heard from Congressman Scott earlier. There is a lot of talk about apprenticeship these days, and we are thrilled because, as was mentioned, I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the National AFL-CIO, which is the federation, an umbrella group of America's unions. And it's 56 different affiliates, 12.5 million working people. And we are a policy and advocacy organization that fights to improve work and quality of life for all workers, not just union members. So I like to think of us as innovators. I don't know if you've ever seen that bumper sticker, the labor movement, the folks that brought you the weekend. That's us. And I love that bumper sticker because it's a perfect example of union innovation. If you think about it, the weekend was a response to the changes in our economy and our society. And just like the ones we're experiencing now, right? On policy, on standards, on protections. So when the Industrial Revolution was coming, work hours were insane and unsustainable. We innovated the weekend. And apprenticeship, I think, is another example of innovation where, we in the labor movement create some of the most effective and important talent pipelines in the United States. So we've been training workers for over 100 years. Our models have been around for a long time because they work. And I just want to say thank you to JFF as a leader in expanding apprenticeship, because we are so proud to partner with you to look at, things like the industrial manufacturing technician, for example. That apprenticeship is attracting a diverse workforce in manufacturing. So we're excited to be here today.
That's great. Thank you very much. And, with, your work speaks for itself. I mean, in a COVID world and worker safety, I know you guys have been working double overtime on those sort of things too, which are really important, not only for what we've been going through the last year, but what we'll be doing the next year. So thank you for that. Dane Lynn from the Business Roundtable, whose offices are right around the corner from ours in Washington, D.C., but the Business Roundtable is an august organization and well thought of on the Hill and in business and elsewhere. Dane leads the immigration and workforce and education side of the Business Roundtable. Dane, welcome, and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing over at the Business Roundtable.
Hey, thanks, Eric. And just to echo Liz's comments, thanks for having me. JFF is one of the top 5 in my book. Maybe I should say the top organization to work with in the country. We are so happy to work, so pleased to work with JFF on a number of issues, some of which will come up in the course of the discussion. I just need to piggyback on one of Liz's comments. I want to thank AFL-CIO for the weekend, but since I've been working remotely, I don't seem to have a personal life anymore. So my personal life is my professional life. So anything you can do to help me out, Liz, would be greatly appreciated.
We're on the case.
Much appreciated. And I also got a cup of coffee because after listening to Carol and Lee, man, like I need some energy for this panel at the end of the session. But let me just tell you a little bit about BRT and some of the work that we've been doing. As Eric indicated, I lead our work on education, workforce, and immigration. But more basically, BRT is a CEO organization. As of today, 216 of America's largest US-based companies. We're a CEO organization, and our goal really is to promote the US economy and expanded opportunity for all. And that starts with people. At the end of the day, and not just because of the recent events over the past year, but it starts with providing equal opportunity for everyone. And in my work, that happens to play itself out, yes, on the federal policy work, where we're focused on a number of workforce issues, one of which is work-based opportunities. And apprenticeships are clearly one of the key strategies. But let me just clear up one misconception, or what some people think is a misconception on why apprenticeships matter to the BRT. It is not apprenticeships mattering because it's another route, it's an alternative to the people who can't do college level work. That is not what registered apprenticeships are. Registered apprenticeships are for individuals who want a pathway of upward mobility, and that happens in a lot of different ways. It can happen through apprenticeships, 2-year, certificate, 4-year colleges and universities. So we're really about promoting the multiple pathways grounded in a demonstration of what you know, the skills, both the hard skills and the soft skills. So, but the great thing about the BRT is that our workforce agenda intersects with healthcare, with infrastructure. And if we turn our attention on the federal policy work to infrastructure, you cannot talk about infrastructure without talking about workforce. And this just isn't about jobs that are shovel ready. It's about being able to fill the 6.9 million jobs that are open today and the jobs that are going to evolve over time. So apprenticeships are integral to that work. And we think that CEOs are a key constituency that can actually not just talk about the importance, but can demonstrate it by providing high quality apprenticeships that lead to full-time employment and opportunities for upward mobility.
That's great. And it's so, thank you, Dane. And it's so, interesting to see I don't want to say the pivot, but how the Business Roundtable, I didn't realize it was only 260 CEOs. Seems like a lot to you, but there's a lot of companies out there, but these are the nation's largest CEOs who have pivoted really to workforce and, worker needs and trying to contribute more to their communities. And I think that's been really noticeable over the last year or so that you guys have focused on that. And we think it's a good way for you guys to go focusing on that. Thrilled also that you're interested in apprenticeship. And Dane, it warms my heart to hear you say registered apprenticeship. I just love it. And I also flag, all of the work going on in apprenticeship the last 7 years, and I would say most of the transformation started during the Obama administration, has just been a really important focus on what's going on in the business community and with workers and opportunities. So anyway, it's great to get there. I lost some of my thought, but now I want to go to Petra. Now, Petra, I know your organization, but have just met you recently. I want to introduce Petra Mitchell with Catalyst Connections in Pennsylvania. And I'm wondering if, Petra, you could talk a little bit about MEPs in general, and then talk a little bit specifically how you work in the great state of Pennsylvania.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for having me as well. It's great to hear about or from so many people that are as passionate about manufacturing and workforce development as we are here at Catalyst Connection. So yeah, we're an economic development organization. We're dedicated to serving small and medium-sized manufacturers in our little neck of the woods. It's in southwestern Pennsylvania. We're headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And as Eric mentioned, we are part of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. And we're also part of the Pennsylvania Industrial Resource Center program. So the MEP program is a federally funded initiative under the U.S. Department of Commerce. It's housed at NIST. We have centers that cover every square inch of the United States, and every small and medium-sized manufacturer has access to a program like Hallis Connection, again, located all over the country. And we're one phone call away from pretty much every small manufacturer that may have a need for some of our services. And those include some of the things that we do: management consulting, technical assistance, and of course, workforce development programs. And the idea really being, if you just think about at the end of the day, we believe that as individual small and medium-sized manufacturers, SMMs, as individual companies improve their competitiveness, improve their ability to compete in a global environment, create and retain jobs, collectively then they impact the regional community, the regional economy, and create these kinds of high-paying, family-sustaining job opportunities that we're all talking about.
Great. And for those of you in our audience, if you're not connected with your state manufacturing extension partnership, you should be. They have a lot of interesting things going on, and again, they're all over the country. So thanks a lot for that, Petra. Liz, I'm going to come to you, and it sort of goes back to a panel I think you sat with me on at DOL probably in 2016. But I think you were one of the people talking about future work before future work was cool, right? I mean, you've been sort of looking at this probably for about 10 years, I'm guessing. So here we are it's not a post-COVID period yet. We know that Black and brown people have been hit particularly hard by COVID. We keep hearing reports about how things are going to change in the world. Technology is going to impact things. Things are not going to be the same after COVID. Well, who really knows? But I would like to get your thoughts about what you see in the near future of work, and what you think how can we lean into this equity thing? Brad and others talked earlier about the percentages of women and people of color and people with disabilities in apprenticeship. They're still pretty low given their representation in the population. So I just would like you to look in your crystal ball for a little bit and talk about that. And now that we have a change of administration in Washington that's really interested in these things even more, would love your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, that seems like a million years ago when we talked at the DOL on that panel. And you're right. It's been the future of work is on everyone's minds. What constantly fascinates me is that we talk about future of work, but not often are there workers at the center of that conversation. So I've been trying to, like you said, kind of kick those doors open and get in every room that I can find that's talking about this issue. And we're focused like a laser beam on the technological change in the workplace to make sure there's a worker voice at the front end of the innovation process, not at the back end when the technology's already been developed, right? So we actually just established at the AFL-CIO a technology institute, and this is going to be our think and do tank, as they say, around workers and technology. But we all know that technology can actually make our working lives easier and better, or it can be used to dehumanize and exploit workers. And we actually see it as an opportunity. And you and I have been talking about this for some time, to shape that technology, whether it's plastics, electric vehicles, semiconductors, large batteries. If we choose to, we can co-create widely shared prosperity and wealth in this country. And I use the National Science Foundation as an example. It invests about $250 million annually in advanced manufacturing research. And that's $250 million in public funding. And we think that that should have an ROI for the people, right? It should benefit workers and lead to good jobs, especially in the supply chain, so that manufacturing can actually grow in this country as we innovate. And again, we should use the worker voice at the center in the R&D process and in deciding how technology is developed, which leads then to better decisions about how it's used. And then of course, the jobs that flow from that, from the new technology. So the National Robotics Initiative is an example too, the mission of that is to figure out how to use robots in ways that support humans, including on the job. And so this is exactly what we're talking about. We want technology to augment human ability in manufacturing. And I like to think of it as collective creation. We often talk in the labor movement about a collective action. In some ways, it's collective creation. And this is a paradigm shift from the current one where workers are sort of sidelined, right? So it just has to be at every relevant stage of research, development, and not just at the end as an afterthought. And I think that we have a lot of opportunity together to create that future.
Excellent. Excellent. Dane, so let me pivot to you for a minute. You work with, large organizations, large national corporations, Fortune 100, 500, whatever it is. So where do they stand with the equity issue, right? You have a lot of employers who are in the manufacturing space. Some do union work, some are non-union. But do you see a shift in the leadership about equity, diversity, and inclusion? Are they leaning into it? Do they really mean it? Or is this just something in their social responsibility offices? I wonder if you can just talk about the big business perspective on equity and diversity. Do they want to reflect their own communities or what? And then Petra, I'm going to talk to you about the same question for the small and medium-sized businesses, which are very important. Dane?
Yeah, I think this is a really good and important question, Eric. Someone from the outside might say, companies' interest in these issues has been about writing the check and moving on. And it's been a corporate social responsibility exercise. I've been at BRT for 9 years, and I have to tell you that, from the day I went to BRT, I started to see companies, whether it was ExxonMobil or the work I did with Northrop Grumman or IBM, a real commitment, and I'm going to talk in specific ways here in a minute, toward the equity, diversity, inclusion, whatever order you want to put those in, agenda. And it's really played its way out in very concrete ways. So for example, yesterday, as part of a larger effort that JFF is a part of, the Multiple Pathways Initiative, we have companies that are saying, these algorithms that we use to sort people on who gets an interview, there's a problem here. And so we had about half of our membership together learning about what IBM has done to not only minimize, eliminate those biases, but how do you avoid creating new biases? And there's some real challenges there. And I think companies are now beginning to take action in fundamental ways in the way I just described. But I think more than looking at algorithms, we need to actually, what we see companies committing to through this Multiple Pathways Initiative is an opportunity to say, to ask themselves, why do we have a BA required for every job in the company? Not every job requires a bachelor's degree. What are the skills that are essential to being successful? And not just at the entry level, but for the people who currently work at the company. And to Liz's point, how do we show the individuals who currently work, who need to improve their technological skills, not just to stay employed, but to seek better opportunities for the company? And I always talk about it as better pay, better benefits, and job security, quite frankly. If you've worked for GE for 15 years, you don't want to go anywhere. You want to look for new opportunities. You don't want to just have a lateral move. But I think what we're seeing through the work we've been doing for almost a year with our companies through the Multiple Pathways Initiative is to say, how do we look at the job descriptions, but how do we build an ecosystem for what the future of work looks like at our company? And how does that impact our employees? And how do our employees help shape what that ecosystem looks like, to Liz's point? Because I think it's critical to the success, to your ability to retain workers, to your ability for workers to be able to say, I like working here because they asked me what I think. The last point I would make is we also have to show individuals, as this future of work idea, we have to show individuals what many are calling the skill adjacencies. If I'm an executive assistant And I have accrued a number of skills over my time at Northrop Grumman. Yet I want to make a move to another job. What are the skill gap? What's the gap between what I have today and what I aspire to be? Next job I aspire to take. And then what role, and I think we see many companies like Humana beginning to develop their own curriculum to be able to say, and here's the way in which we're going to make it easier for you to access that curriculum. So to me, those are very clear, and ultimately get the next best job. So for me, those are the ways in which companies are more concretely demonstrating their commitment to equity and diversity. It's not lip service. It's about then also reporting the metrics. And that's actually my last thought here. You have to show what was the baseline and what changed as a result of the commitment. Because if we're not transparent and we don't report the progress we're making as a result of what we're doing, then one has to wonder how serious the commitment is.
Thrilled to hear that Business Roundtable is looking at those issues and that it's a little bit more than social responsibility. So that's great to clarify. Thank you. Petra, so, look, you're really where the action is. You're at the state level or the local or regional level. You're dealing with, and I know this was true when I worked, at the workforce system. I mean, I think all workforce is local, right? That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where a lot of the action happens. So I'd love your perspective on what you think is going on with the small and medium-sized business community. I would also preface that by saying, as much as I love apprenticeship, I'm not a one-note Johnny, right? There's a lot of workforce and job training programs that work. None of them, I think, have the end result and outcomes that high-quality registered apprenticeship programs have. I do think they've been built on the shoulders of our friends in unions over the last 100 years, but they are applicable to other industries and occupations. But when you get back to looking at the small and medium-sized businesses, what's on their mind? Where are they with this whole equity and diversity issue? They don't have corporate social responsibility office. They may have one HR person if they're lucky and 25 employees. So I'm really interested in your thoughts. And I know when I worked in the workforce system, 75% of the people I worked with were small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, actually, you're absolutely right, Eric. 99% of the manufacturing establishments in this country have less than 500 employees per location. So there are a lot of small and medium-sized manufacturers in our manufacturing sector. So in our community, Southwestern Pennsylvania, we're seeing a lot of employers that have made tremendous progress in terms of diversifying their workforce. And I could, speak to certainly many examples of that. However, I would say for sure there are challenges that clearly exist, because this is a sector, particularly when you get outside of Pittsburgh, like many communities, it gets pretty rural pretty fast. And we just haven't had that kind of history of a diverse workforce, particularly in those rural communities. So we are, working with employers to help them overcome some of these challenges. And I would say, the thinking that's on our mind is the career pathway model. And while I agree, apprenticeship program is not, it's not the only solution, I think it is a key solution to helping to solve this problem. So in our community, the foundation of our career pathway model is the IMT apprenticeship program, the Industrial Manufacturing Technician. And I know a lot of people have been talking about it. It's just such a terrific program. And how it relates, I think, to this topic is that it really enables an employer, small employer, that doesn't have all the resources that you're describing, to take an off-the-shelf model that helps to articulate what are those skills, competencies, and behaviors that are needed by their workers, regardless of the background of that individual, regardless of the gender, race, you name it. This is what you need to be able to do. We can help them customize that, but for the most part, it's an off-the-shelf solution, right? As we're training existing workers against that model, we can also begin to push that back into the community. So we can now clearly articulate to job seekers, this is what you need to be able to do. And more importantly, I think we can clearly articulate into our high schools and demonstrate that from, in our case, middle school, the career awareness and the kinds of experiential things that we're doing at the middle school level that's age appropriate for them, there's a clear pathway all the way up to manufacturing CEO if that person is interested. And again, that is independent of your race, your gender, your religion, any of that. If you have an interest, we can demonstrate that clear model. We can show you people that are like you, that are already engaged in that model. And we can show you a clear outcome and a clear benefit to participating in that model. So I fully believe career pathways are the key to the future of manufacturing work and diversifying the workforce as we've been discussing it.
So I want to ask you a quick follow-up just because I want to get this out there. And that is, we at JFF put out a pre-apprenticeship framework. We're continuing to drive deep on pre-apprenticeship. We know the workforce highway is littered with a lot of really bad pre-apprenticeship programs over the last 40 years in this country that were nothing more than a GED, a little bit of life skills, and 20 minutes of contextual learning. So we're of the belief that creating these pathways for underrepresented populations can at least get them ready to enter. They may not get direct entry. They still have to pass a bunch of requirements to get into these high quality apprenticeship programs, but it's getting them ready. Do you see that as a good strategy to get more folks on the pathway in, since you brought up pathways?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, in our case, we have a registered pre-apprenticeship program for the IMT, actually. So our high school students are earning their CPT, Certified Production Technician credentials. But not only that, they're getting that career awareness and workplace learning experience, augmenting their curriculum. And of course, we're helping them through that, that content, helping them to be successful, to pass those tests, get those certificates and those credentials. And I would say, in 2 short months, we went from 2 students to 82 students. And so we have a strong demand for this program in our community. Now we have 27,000 high school seniors, so we have a long way to go from 82 to something closer to 27,000. But the early interest, not only by schools, but by the students themselves, I think is a really strong indicator that this is definitely the way to go.
Well, that's really encouraging to hear. I mean, I think we would agree with you on that. I think, there's so many opportunities, and you brought up the rural areas, some of those high school kids go from, Western Pennsylvania to Philly to go to school. They're likely not to come back to Western Pennsylvania, right? And they don't see pathways in their own communities. So I think, looping people into those pathways in their own communities could keep people home or certainly put them on a better pathway towards, some reality in the labor market and their own well-being. Liz, let me go to you again. You have a unique perspective. I think you deal with locals and your councils and what's happening on the ground, all the way up to people at the White House. Although I don't know if you've been there in the last 50 days. I hope so. But I want to, sort of get your advice to the people on the call. We've got some employers, we've got community colleges, workforce people, labor council folks, IMT programs, apprenticeship folks. I'm wondering what you would say to them about how to get into the equity space, what their priorities are, any advice you have for them when they think about their next generation of workers, the post-COVID recovery period. What advice would you have for folks?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question because I was itching to get in on the issues around creating equitable pathways. And certainly the labor movement is, we've, again, had a lot of experience in this area, but as of late, I would say in the last decade or so especially, we have been focused on recruiting women, people of color, veterans, formerly incarcerated or returning citizens. And in this COVID-19 environment, we've seen how COVID-19 has hit pretty much every sector, some sectors harder than others, and some communities, obviously, as we know, harder than others. And it's leaving Black and brown people especially, and women unemployed at higher rates. So this is even more critical that we be clear that as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we need to be looking to what are those emerging industries and how do we get people moving from one industry to another. And what's the linkage? And we often think the labor movement is the linkage, right, to help people navigate those pathways. And, people are worried right now, right? That's what I always like to bring to the table here is a worker perspective. I mean, workers are out there worrying about what they're going to do. especially in the hospitality sector, where people have lost jobs over the last year. Entertainment and hospitality has been like 95% unemployed. So apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship is exactly what we're lifting up here. It's the name of the game. And I would say for employers and others who are out there, it's the one model that doesn't put the burden on the individual. They've already got enough burdens right now. And as we know, the way we've kind of shoveled off responsibility, decade after decade, is it the government? No. Is it employers? Yes, but not all the way, right? Now it's the individual picking up the tab for their own training, and often they don't have a job at the end of that training. And so I think the name of the game here is partnerships. And I like to think of our model with labor and management working together. And we see in Europe so successfully the tripartite partnerships with labor, management, and government. Being intentional about the linking of the training to the job. And so I think that's what we do best. And I loved that Petra raised the IMT, because I think that's a perfect example. In Wisconsin, you heard from Randy Berth, the Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership taught us some very important lessons, right? That, we can apply apprenticeship to production occupations, not just maintenance, right? And this is a structural advantage for companies that want to be more, improve their performance, right? And we can improve diversity by making it more accessible and more achievable. And the shorter duration registered apprenticeship programs can help people move up that career ladder. We like to talk about stackable credentials, right? But IMT graduates have gone on to new positions like maintenance or supervision by, making their way up that ladder. And it becomes very evident and very clear how you do that. And I will say one last thing, women, the opportunities for women in apprenticeship, the stories you hear, these are life-changing opportunities. And I came across a woman who was raising 2 kids on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation by herself, homeless, and a course in welding put her on track to totally change her life. And she completed a 12-week program where she learned about the Boilermakers Union. And so then she applied to the apprenticeship program. She was accepted. She's now a second-year apprentice. And she's supporting her family and has such pride and dignity in her work. And she was just recognized with the Tradeswomen Heroes Award, right? This woman's life has been totally transformed. So this learn while you earn model, I think, is the key to our success. And we need to partner together as much as possible to make it more well known to more people.
And that reach out to tribal territories and rural areas and Asia Pacific. I mean, I'm going to go back to Brad's point. It has to be purposeful and intentional. You just have to lean into that. A lot of us in the workforce system, we do our programs and we hope that there's diverse people in there, but there's a lot of purpose and intentionality to this.
And
work.
Returning citizens.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do a follow-up with you, Liz, real quick, and then I want to go to Dane again. When you and your leadership, is talking about these equity issues, do you think the message is getting down to your members? When I say members, I mean the local councils, the employers that hire your members. Is the word getting down to them? Is that something that is an objective view of the diversity equity conversation down the pipeline, if you will?
Yes, I think apprenticeship there's a different perception now. It used to be, as I think Dane said earlier, that if you couldn't go to college, I guess you'll go to apprenticeship. That is absolutely not the case. And we know that apprenticeship can be the equivalent to a 4-year degree. And that you have to have college level algebra in some cases to get into my union's electrical apprenticeship, for example. So I believe, yes, it is, perception has changed. And I see that there's a new attitude in our country around how we reinvent and reimagine apprenticeship, so that it's not just in the sectors that you used to think, also the stereotype of, heavy industry or construction. No, we're talking about entertainment industry. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about, manufacturing, sophisticated, highly skilled manufacturing work that is not your quote granddaddy's manufacturing work, right? And so I think our members are seeing this in a different way. And then also knowing the technological shifts that are taking place, apprenticeship is also a pathway from one sector to another, right? So that if you end up in as we face climate change, we know that our members in the coal mines, for example, want to look to what are the growing and evolving sectors that, and how do I get access to those jobs? And often we can translate their work experience and credit that in an apprenticeship program that gives them a leg up and a place to go, and then that pathway to where they want to be, because this is all about creating prosperity so people can, feed their families, make a decent living, and have some respect and dignity on the job.
Outstanding. Dane, so want to chat just for another minute. First of all, what advice would you have for folks online? But let me talk about the companies that BRT works with. You've talked about pathway work. I brought up pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship readiness programs that can raise the tide of entry requirements for folks to get into apprenticeships. What are some of your thoughts about a lot of people that we're going to reach out to are going to need some development work before they can enter some of these occupations. Actually, that's true with everybody. So what do you think about pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship readiness, the pathway development as a gateway to higher better jobs, better wages?
Thoughts. Let me build on something that Liz said around partnerships. And I just want to reinforce they have to be purposeful partnerships that lead individuals to jobs. Pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships to engage in providing those opportunities because it's in vogue and it is not the right motivation for doing this. The purpose is to create an equal opportunity for individuals that have the same success, the same quality of life, all the benefits that you and I have, and our children have, our families have. And to me, that doesn't start when you're out of a job. That starts for those students that are interested early in their high school years in pre-apprenticeships and helping individuals understand what the range of opportunities are. And how do we get our secondary schools to really engage with, meaningfully engage with employers who, whether they're rural, urban, suburban, have a need for employees. The hospitality and travel industry have been hard hit, no doubt about it. But there are a lot of jobs out there. So how do we help those individuals not just see the opportunities, but also help them? And I think a number of our employers are doing this, whether it's Aon and Accenture up in Chicago, or Rockwell Automation up in Wisconsin, who has a competition every year, and they pick 100 vets, highly diverse population of individuals who go through a 9-month training program. And yes, they have a lot of experience in the military, but there's some foundational skills they've not brought to the table. And the company's helping them build some of those foundational skills that are critical to being successful in the program. But how do we do that with, how do we create those partnerships to build, in some cases, foundational literacy and math skills? Because if you don't have those, your ability to succeed in the pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship model are not, you're not going to see that success. So we think there is a real opportunity for employers, school districts, 2-year colleges to work together to take some of the least advantaged individuals in our society, working or not, and put them on a path to upward mobility. The last point I want to make, Eric, and I want to point to this in the last stimulus, the rescue plan. Many of you may not, some people watching may not be familiar with the the Economic Development Administration, which is housed at Commerce and typically had an appropriation of $300 million. There is now $3 billion in that partnership. We need to make sure apprenticeships are a part of the sectoral partnerships that Commerce is talking about. And we're going to try as employers at BRT, and I hope the other panelists and those of you watching are going to try to influence, how does that money get used? Because that money needs to get used to train people for jobs that are in demand. And then what's the relationship of those funds to the work of the state and local workforce boards? I always talk about linking and leveraging. We can impact more people's lives if we link and leverage. And that's what we need to do. $3 billion is a significant, or at least it's a lot of money to me. I don't know about you. But I think it's an opportunity to link with the existing investments around apprenticeships to actually accelerate quantity and quality of what we have and opportunities for people.
Yeah, and I think the incoming secretary, Governor Raimondo from Rhode Island, is just the person to carry this forward. She totally got workforce at the state level, and I'm sure she'll make a great partner with Marty Walsh over at the Department of Labor if they ever confirm it, which I think is going to happen next week, I hope. Thank you, Dane. So real quick, we're wrapping up, but just a real quick lightning round for some last minute thoughts. Does the future look bright? What advice do you have for the audience? Anything you want to say? I'm going to go Petra, Dane, and Liz. I'm going to give you the last word. Petra, what advice do you have?
Oh, well, the future always looks bright to me. So absolutely. Well, I think I'd just like to reiterate, Eric, what you said. If you're not working with your local MEP, please find them and reach out to them. And if you can't find them, reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you. And then just the IMT, it's been said so often, but it's such a great program as a foundational tool, not the only tool, but a foundational tool that can really help to build the pipeline, as I mentioned, as well as the future of work and into moving workers into advanced technologies.
This has been a great commercial for the Industrial Manufacturing Technician program, but it's a really good, solid program. And if you want to learn more about it, you can reach out to Beth Shannon at Working for America Institute, or Randy Berth over at WRTP. Brainchild behind a lot of this, or Miriam Sullivan at JFF. And I don't know if we have chat available. If you could post a link to it, that would be great. Dane, what are some parting words you have for the folks listening in today?
The glass is always half full. And I think that we have an opportunity to accelerate what high quality apprenticeships look like and move more individuals into not just the jobs we have open today, but if you look at the mega trends in the jobs, whether it's climate or otherwise, the jobs that are going to evolve, and companies are looking to train those people now. So don't underestimate, yes, we're Fortune 250, don't underestimate the interest of companies to want to partner with you. We have companies partnering with San Jose State, with Columbus Community College in Ohio, and even outside the structure of 2-year and 4-year schools. So don't underestimate the interest of employers to want to do not just what's right by the corporate social responsibility, but to do work that actually helps individuals, not just meet their bottom line, but help people and improve the economy. So reach out, call them, talk to those CHROs, which, by the way, the CHROs are a linchpin. They are critical to all of us.
Yeah, that's great. And, Greg Case, the CEO of Aon in Chicago, would say all of this work is a business imperative. So it's reflecting what your communities look like, but this is not a social welfare program. This is a business imperative for the future of the economy and these companies. Liz, some parting words about anything you want to talk about today?
Sure, Eric. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank JFF. You've been tremendous, and we can't wait to continue our good work together. And now's the time. And as was said by my fellow panelists, we have a big opportunity in front of us. It's up to us, the believers in this, to get it out there, and increase the pickup rate, right, from other employers who may be hesitant. And I would just say to those employers, if you're interested in better productivity, if you're interested in a safer, more efficient workplace, and to be blunt, if you're interested in more profit, you need the most highly skilled workers that you can find. And where do you find them? through our apprenticeship programs. So I think that, again, to reiterate what Dane said about partnership, this is how it's going to happen, is all of us working together. Dane, call me, because that $3 billion, we want to work with you, JFF, anyone we can find to make sure that we're growing the apprenticeship pie and reinventing and reimagining it for the future.
That's great. Well, it was a great conversation with you three. Boy, thank goodness we're recording this, and we'll be posting it at some point. Liz Schuler with AFL-CIO, Dane Lynn with Business Roundtable, and my new friend, Petra Mitchell with MEP Catalyst Connections in Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining it today. This is the first time in a long time that Miriam didn't give me the hook because I went over. So thank you, Miriam. I'm going to turn it back over to you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Dane. Thank you, Petra. And thank you, Liz, for your time and just for sharing some really great comments. I've had the benefit of listening to all of the panels really closely and have been able to capture some really good threads that have shown up among all three panels. One, we started off with a conversation around bipartisan support for apprenticeship. One thing I heard really from Chairman Scott is that we're working toward 1 million more apprentices, and there's really great energy behind reauthorizing the National Apprenticeship Act. In the panel following the welcoming, we heard from Sasha and Brad and Eric just about the investment made by the Department of Labor. She referenced $575 million spent by the Department of Labor and just the overall demand for apprenticeship programs. That demand is not decreasing. And Brad made a comment about us needing to be really intentional around diversity. The all female panel, that was really exciting for me. And I really had some great takeaways from that around you can't be what you can't see. That really stood out for me. And then the closing panel with Eric, Dane, and Petra really went through and provided some great comments around apprenticeships being a pathway for upward mobility. And that can happen in a multiple of ways. An apprenticeship is just one such pathway. And, our work at JFF, our work at the center seems to be more important than ever. And so we at JFF and the AFL-CIO Working for America Institute, we're here to help you create your own apprenticeship program built towards equity and the future of work. We're working with both union and non-union employers within 2 different projects that put this event together. So over the next 3 years, the Partnership for Advanced Manufacturing Apprenticeships, also known as PAMA, will work with 600 employers in order to serve 5,000 apprentices in order to lift up opportunities for people with diverse backgrounds. PAMA is managed by the AFL-CIO Working for America Institute through a $6 million Department of Labor Closing the Skills Gap grant. And additionally, JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, we received a $12 million contract from the Department of Labor with a specific goal of increasing the number of women and people of color within advanced manufacturing and within the advanced manufacturing workforce. This project is also known as IDEA M, Improving Diversity and Equity in Apprenticeship for Manufacturing. So I'm sure you're wondering, how do you get connected to one of us or any one of these projects? Please fill out an interest form at jff.org/manufacturing and complete that, and one of us, either from JFF or the AFL-CIO Working for America Institute, will get back to you. And we really look forward to working with you on just a really important topic. And we look forward to your connecting with us, and thank you for attending.